Greetings, Training for Translators listeners. This is Corinne McKay with episode 25 of the Training for Translators podcast. And thanks so much for helping the podcast get to more than 11,000 total downloads over those past 24 episodes. And if you are listening to this and you're not yet on my mailing list, you should join at trainingfortranslators.com. Just go to the sidebar of any blog post. And I guarantee that you will like the Training for Translators newsletter because that is what this podcast is based on. So for this month's episode, I'm recording this on April 27th of 2026, and this is the week that a lot of big companies release their quarter one earnings or have their quarter one earnings call. So this is kind of my quarterly earnings call as well. And I'm going to base this episode on a post I wrote on my blog last week about how this year, 2026, is going so far. I think we can all agree that 2025 in the freelance world was, if we want to get technical, kind of crazy. Translation, I think 2025 was kind of the year where the fallout from ChatGPT really hit with a lot of agencies having their default workflow be an AI generated first draft that is then edited by a human. So for the translators on the receiving end of that work, that I think resulted in either a lot less work or a lot less interesting and lucrative work, because I think given the choice, most translators would not prefer to do machine translation post editing, MTPE, if they had another choice. And I think as a result, we saw a lot of translators who either moved to in house jobs so they weren't so dependent on the erratic freelance workflow, or I talked to a bunch of people who just left the language professions entirely and did something totally different. Yet other freelancers were in a real scramble looking for new types of work. For example, all of a sudden wanting to work with direct clients when they had never done that before, maybe thinking about interpreting, maybe thinking about writing, copywriting, ghostwriting, and other services that are not so affected by AI. So I thought we could take a look at how all of this is shaking out, both in my own world and in what I'm hearing from other people. And I do think that the quarterly earnings call joke aside, that March and April are actually a really good time to do an initial assessment for the year of how your year is going. Why is that? Because I think that by now you have enough data to see some trends, but you also still have enough time to course correct if things aren't going well. Because I think in my business and for a lot of freelancers, the thing that can be a little bit deceptive is that first quarter is often our slowest. This year, for example, I didn't even work until around January 10th. And I think a lot of clients take a while to kind of ramp up after the beginning of the year. But on the other hand, you don't want to wait too long. Like, I think that if you wait until halfway through the year to look at how your income is going, that then you don't have a lot of time to make corrections if you're not earning what you hoped to be earning. Mostly my hope for this income analysis of myself is to help you to do the same thing for yourself. So for me, I would say my business is going in two directions this year. Things are good, but things are also somewhat different. As I wrote about and talked about in my year-end wrap-up blog post and podcast episode, and if you would like to go back and listen to that, that's episode 22, which is called 2025, the year in review. As I wrote about and talked about, 2025 was my highest earning year in more than 20 years of freelancing. So I've been a full-time freelancer since 2002, and this was the most money I ever made. And yet, at least some of that I achieved by, frankly, doing the things that I tell other people not to do. I worked a bit too much, and I think with interpreting, it has been difficult for me to get out of that scarcity mindset. Like, I have to take anything and everything, or I'm not going to have any work again, because I've been interpreting for a lot shorter of a time than I've been translating. This year, I'm very happy to report things are looking better in both of those departments. So I set a somewhat amorphous but important to me goal of taking more time for my creative interests, namely yoga and music, on weekdays. I almost never work on weekends, but that is when I tend to go do big outdoor things like skiing, hiking, mountain biking for most of the day, and I come home and I'm kind of too tired to play my cello. So I've been able to follow through on that. I've been averaging going to yoga 3 times a week. My lute duet partner, that's Lute, not Loot. I play the Renaissance lute. My lute duet partner and I performed at a small community event which was a lot of fun, and I played my cello in a cello choir through an organization called Denver Adult Strings Camp, which for anyone who lives on the Colorado Front Range, I would highly recommend. I feel honestly a lot more rested, more balanced, and I have tried to let go of that feeling like I have to be working every single second of every weekday, sort of like the hatchet over the neck feeling. As evidence of that, I've read 6 books on paper so far this year. Of course, at the end of the year, as always, I'll publish my little mini reviews of those and listen to 6 audiobooks. Actually, that's now up to 7 because I listened to a 7th audiobook since I wrote this blog post, largely because I decided that my mental health needed a break from political podcasts, which I listen to a lot of, in addition to being kind of an obsessive reader of the New York Times. I also branched out with my own professional development. I took a class by a UK based freelance writer named Lizzie Davy called Create Better Content. And I spoke on an AI era diversification panel at the virtual conference of the American Society of Journalists and Authors, which was a lot of fun. Thanks to my colleague, Dawn Alcott, for inviting me to do that. Finally, I gave myself some time to do some just for fun writing and translation, which I really enjoy. I indulged my frustrated inner travel writer by writing 2 new blog posts. One is sort of a business related one, why I decided to get a United Quest credit card for the travel benefits. And the second one is not businessy at all. It's about how I spent part of the last 2 summers climbing 14 of Colorado's 14,000-foot peaks. That might sound like a lot, but there's 58 of them total. I'm not even close to being done with them, but I did climb 14. Now, the real question is whether this improved balance is going to affect my income, which obviously is still to be determined. When I wrote this post, so that was just like a week and a half ago, I had earned $41,000 after deducting payments to my online course guest instructors. That was somewhat less, or maybe fairly significantly less than the $49,000 I had earned at this time last year. But I am still on track to earn $130,000 to $140,000 this year, which is okay with me, given that I feel like I'm working significantly less. My real goal is just to stay above $125,000. Now, some details about my workflow. One way in which I am not a data person at all is that I just cannot manage to do time tracking. There, I said it. I've tried multiple times with Toggle and other tools and just I can't remember to turn it off. I often sometimes don't work on one thing. For one, I'm working on a couple of things at once. I just really struggle with it. And so I realized that it is not super valid to just say, well, I have this vague feeling that I've been working a lot less or I have a lot more free time, but that's about what I've got for you. I also 3 interesting things in my business. I landed a new retainer client for the corporate writing side of my company. It's a translation company where I do things like ghostwrite the CEO's LinkedIn posts, write the company newsletter, I make their white papers into blog posts. I really like that work and it meets my income goals. So I'm really happy with that. I also landed a new interpreting direct client through a referral. That's a little bit unique because the bulk of my interpreting is either for courts or interpreting agencies, but I really like both the direct client and the work. I also did a couple of fairly large translation projects for my direct law firm clients. Now, this reinforces my opinion that for those of you who do legal translation, that it has been either basically decimated by AI or the lawyers don't really care about AI and not much in between. I don't use AI for first draft translations. I do use it for research and idea generation. But my law firm clients, my feeling has always been they're paying me to deal with something that they don't want to deal with. And that's kind of where it ends. Now, the question is, what am I hearing from other people? Because this is just one data point. I feel like I am a positive person almost to a fault because it can cause me to think that things in the world in general or in my business are totally fine even when they're very much not fine. But I do feel like a lot of the AI fallout in the translation world at least has fallen. Now, whether we are going to see the AI tsunami 2.0 at whatever point AI interpreting becomes a viable option, I don't know. I have no crystal ball on that. I personally do not feel, sadly, that AI is a bubble. I just think the truth is that it saves too much time and money, particularly for clients who those are their primary concerns, that they have a tight budget and fairly low quality standards. So I don't think that AI is a bubble that's going to burst. But I do think that perhaps we have already navigated the worst of the AI slash and burn. That clients who are really all in on AI have already gone there. And maybe clients in the language business are becoming more discerning about how and when they use AI because they're realizing that it sounds like a robot. And in my experience, there is good work to be had in getting clients out of the AI slop. So I have gained a couple of new clients recently who the reason that they're hiring me is to put a human touch on their stuff or because they tried AI interpreting and it was really not a viable option. Another interesting data point is earlier this winter, I spoke at a really interesting event, which was for students in the graduate translation programs at Kent State University, which is a good translation program in the US state of Ohio. And a lot of these factors were truly on display there. You would definitely notice that Kent's programs are a lot smaller than they used to be, a lot fewer students. And yet, the students who are there, they're fired up about their job prospects. A number of them stressed to me, and I do think that this is like a generational thing. So I'm 54. My own 23-year-old daughter is probably around the same age as a lot of these students. And one thing they pointed out that I thought was brilliant and that I barely think about at all is that the job that people of my generation would call translation now goes by a variety of names. Some of the ones that they listed were things like language lead, linguistic data analyst, linguistic QA, bilingual content specialist. Whereas a lot of people of my age and career stage are looking exclusively for jobs that say translator. I think it is just true that most people really don't embrace change, particularly in a job that they really love or at least used to love, and that has changed a lot in the past few years. That's one thing that I think is a really unfortunate side effect of the AI onslaught is that in my experience, most translators really like their jobs and would have, in fact, been happy to continue going on the way they were for the rest of their careers. But I do think that there is still a lot of good work out there. You just have to look for it in different ways. I heard someone say the other day, like, language work has not disappeared, it has changed shape. And I thought that concept of changing shape was really interesting. I've talked to more than a handful of good translators who have totally shifted careers. They've gone to an in-house job that maybe uses their language skills but isn't totally focused on translation, working in marketing of study abroad programs, working for a credentials evaluation agency, things like that. And personally, if that's what you want to do, not that you need my approval, but here it is, thumbs up. I think it is way better to adapt than to pine away for the way you used to work if that way doesn't really exist anymore. So, with that, onward into the rest of the second quarter of this year. And if you want to tell me how things are going for you, just email me at classes@trainingfortranslators.com. And with that, this has been episode 25 of the Training for Translators podcast. I'm your host, Corinne McKay. My website is trainingfortranslators.com. I record this podcast in Audacity using a Shure MV7 Plus microphone, and I host the episodes on Libsyn. And you can listen to them on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or directly on the Training for Translators website. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you in a future episode.